Old Testament and still in Judaism today. You can pray for vengeance. You can take vengeance on your enemies. But Yeshua comes along in the Sermon on the Mount, and then here Paul, and he says, guess what? Our real battle is not with flesh and blood. It's a spiritual one. That doesn't mean we don't do anything physically, but there's a spiritual battle here that we need to understand. There's the devil at work, Satan is at work, and we have to know how to stand and fight against him. I made Aliyah in 1998, began to build this house, the center here in downtown Jerusalem, not far from the Machane Yehuda market. Started in earnest, really, the summer of 2000. Now, and I want to tell you this also because there's things happening in the news today that are a little bit similar, and there's a big wave of terrorism and efforts at terrorism that's happening right now in Israel that reminds a lot of us of what began to happen back in 2000. After Ariel Sharon went up on the Temple Mount, along the failure of certain peace talks, began the second Intifada. And in the years 2000, 2001, 2002, there were a lot of bombings and bus bombings and suicide bombings and terrible, terrible destruction. I was building this house at the time, and I heard, I think, 16 times explosions here in downtown Jerusalem in the matter of 2 years. One of them was on Friday, April 12th, 2002. The shuk is packed with people on a Friday. I mean, wall to wall, you can barely move because it's before the Sabbath, and people are doing their shopping, and there's all kinds of activity, and a million people. A 17-year-old Palestinian Arab girl, Andalib Suleiman, blew herself up as she stood next to a bus, an Egged bus that was on Jaffa Street. Jaffa Street still had buses back then, right? Today it's closed to traffic. Only the light rail is there. She had tried to get into the shuk, but the security, because of the Intifada and all of the terrorism, there was good security, so she was somewhat outside. And she blew herself up and killed 6 people and injured a huge number of people in the process. I was in the shuk. I was about 100 yards away on the other side towards Agrippa Street, and we all heard it, of course. And people ran over there. And I'll never forget, and I still experience a little bit of trauma. It's still hard for me on Thursday nights or Fridays to go to the shuk when it's very, very crowded, because I remember what happened and the destruction, the smell of gunpowder and blood, and the sound, the weird silence with all of these alarms, because the shock waves set off all these alarms, and people screaming and moaning. And to think of what would cause this 17-year-old girl to do such a thing. In the days after that, I don't know, I can't remember if it was for 3 or 4 days, for a week, the shuk was closed. All of the Arab vendors stayed away, and there were crowds, gangs of Jewish men, secular, Orthodox, walking around the city in the shuk, screaming, "Death to the Arabs." And it's hard for you all to imagine how integrated we are here, but I don't know, a third, half of the vendors in the market, in the Machane Yehuda shuk, are Arabs. Many of the men who work for the city, cleaning and doing things around our neighborhood, are all Arabs, okay? And because of what I saw, I mean, it was so wicked, so evil. I mean, you know, there were 2 of the 6 people who were killed. 2 of them were Chinese workers, Chinese construction workers who just happened to be walking by. I mean, this senseless, what do they have to do with this conflict, you know? This senseless, murderous, suicidal, satanic spirit behind this. It was terrible. And I was new here. And I found myself, I almost wanted to walk around with some of these gangs screaming, "Death to the Arab, death to the..." I mean, who would do such a thing? I could still smell in my nose for weeks, in my imagination. But I, soon as I prayed, came to myself, read these verses again, I went, wow, this New Testament, this Paul, this Ephesians, there's nothing else like it. To understand that this is a spiritual battle. You know, I learned when I did some research about this particular bombing, a few days before she did that, she released a video, and this was before the internet, but she made a video, and she's telling about what she was going to do and why. And she had her hand on the Quran. Okay, brothers and sisters, the battle here, the struggle here in the Middle East, in Israel, is first and foremost a spiritual and religious one. I can tell you that it's not Arab Christians, okay, of any stripe. There's never been, as far as I know, even among those Arab Christians who are anti-Israel and pro-liberation theology, okay, don't blow themselves up and blow up innocent people, okay? Only the Muslims do, and I hate to say that, but there is something wicked there. There's something deep. It says, Paul wrote, we struggle against principalities and powers. That experience taught me how we have to struggle in the right way, okay? That's an extreme example, but it doesn't matter what you're going through, whether it's with your spouse or at work or, I don't know, or persecution or harassment, not to say, I wrestle, my struggle is not with flesh and blood. It's not with this person, it's not with this people, it's not against this nation. There is a spiritual reality to this. We need to take that stand. Remember, he said, stand firm in this understanding of the spiritual nature. Stand firm in the power of his might and put on the full armor of God.